We've scoured the internet to bring you the 5 creepiest sounds of ghosts ever recorded. While some aren't quite ghostly, these ones are even more disturbing and could lead you to having some real trouble getting to sleep tonight. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get notified every day for more amazing content. With that being said, let's begin. Number 5. Operation Wandering Soul. Our first item today is an example of some very spooky psychological warfare. They used the concept of the wandering soul, which traditionally is a terrifying idea to the Vietnamese. They believe that the dead must be buried, or else their soul will be left to wander the world aimlessly, in constant pain and suffering. With so many soldiers remaining unburied or being buried improperly during the war, the US used this to their advantage, and began using this superstition to mess with their enemies' minds. Their engineers recorded all sorts of tracks that were meant to sound like Viet Cong who had been killed in action. They even included voices asking their friends and family to stop fighting, going so far as to make it look like their ancestors were speaking to them from beyond the grave. These recordings were used throughout the conflict and were sometimes hooked up to helicopters to spread them en masse. The voices were supposed to make their enemies falter or retreat, hoping that some would even lay down their arms. We're sure that the Viet Cong weren't fooled by the recordings, but they must have been pretty creeped out after hearing these voices played around the clock, slowly driving them crazy in a situation that would end up leaving most people tweaked anyway. Instead of allowing their enemy to retreat and tell their tales, many US soldiers simply opened fire in their general direction whenever they reacted, meaning that its effect was probably not as profound as intended. That, and it's hard to be scared of the noises that you can't hear over sustained gunfire. This tactic must have worked at least a little bit, with the recordings probably having some kind of deleterious effect on morale and the overall mental well-being of those close enough to hear them. This was one of many psychological operations that the US conducted in Vietnam, and definitely wasn't the most successful. It was, however, the creepiest that we could find. Operation Wandering Soul might not have helped to turn the tide of the conflict, but we're sure it's left at least a few scars on more than one psyche, making it somewhat of a win. We still don't like the idea of the US trying to break the minds of their enemies, and believe that they shouldn't have resorted to using dead ancestors and religious beliefs against their enemy. We're also not big fans of napalm or most of what happened during the Vietnam War, so, you know. Number 4. Schizophrenic voices. The following sounds are an auditory representation of what schizophrenics hear when they're having an episode. The recording was developed by using input from a mental health outreach worker and are examples of how they understand these hallucinations to manifest in patients. It's a horrifying ordeal, and we can't believe that people have to deal with it themselves. Many of the voices heard are in the middle of saying some pretty twisted stuff, which would put a strain on anyone who had to put up with them for more than a few minutes. Hearing these sorts of things all the time is pretty messed up, to say the least. We are glad that these were uploaded because they're incredibly interesting, but also super creepy. It's also a plus because we can also share it with you and see what you think. When voices that sound like repeating broadcast messages kicked in, we basically had enough, with the garbled sound sticking with us for a while. The recording was uploaded to YouTube by Gerard Whale and seems to be his creation. We have to applaud him for taking the time to put these together into a string of terrifying voices that, together, would drive us absolutely insane, no doubt about it. We also think that his work as a mental health outreach worker must put him in some very strange situations, especially when dealing with schizophrenics, and while we're intrigued, we say better him than us. We don't envy his job, but it's good to hear that someone's willing to put in the time to do it, as well as helping us understand a day in the life of someone suffering from a severe case of schizophrenia. We really don't know how they do it, and assume that they're probably tormented every second of every day, which would make living a normal life downright impossible. These auditory hallucinations are nuts, but coupled with other symptoms that can present themselves would be completely overwhelming, and we'd spend our days huddled in the corner while rocking back and forth. Number 3. Ghost responds to sleeping woman. If you use a sleep app for your smartphone, it might have a setting that allows for audio recording throughout the night. This allows you an in-depth look at how you sleep and is supposed to help diagnose certain disorders on top of helping you get a good night's sleep in the future. No app can help one woman, however, as her sleep issues seem to be of a paranormal variety instead of something that can be corrected by using traditional methods. Hearing this kind of thing after the fact would give us a serious case of the heebie-jeebies, leaving us no choice but to pack up and find somewhere else to live. The woman in question is named Jenny, and she posted her ordeal online to inform others about her ghostly run-ins. While she was going through recorded audio, she heard something sinister. She's always known that she talks in her sleep, but she says she heard a man's voice responding to her as she spoke, with the voice caught by her app. The app is called Sleep as Android, and she had been using it for a month before she ever noticed anything out of the ordinary. She says she lives alone, making a man's voice responding to her sleep talking something she should call the police about instead of posting the audio online for cyber sleuths to look through. Some commenters have noted that the recorder was set to a different frequency than the voice, making it impossible for her to make the voice herself. The recorder was set to 95 Hz, while the ghostly voice registered at around 265 Hz. Clicking noises can also be heard during the recordings, which some people say could very well be someone rummaging through her belongings. She says that nothing was stolen and no strange recordings have presented themselves since that night, making the entire ordeal even more strange. This could be because she moved out of her old place and into a new one, leaving either her ghost or stalker behind her. It's a good move on her part, and we assume her sleep will be trouble-free from here on out. We took a listen to the recording and we do think it's pretty convincing, but we also think that the idea of a ghost is probably a little off the mark, with someone walking through her apartment at night being more realistic. That being said, our idea of events is definitely more creepy than a little haunting, as standing over someone and responding to them talking in their sleep is the kind of thing that we expect serial killers would do. We doubt that ends well and would choose a ghost over a live person any day of the week. Number 2, Hotel Ghost. A group known as the Central New York Ghost Hunters decided to check out a hotel that was supposedly being haunted by some spirits who were causing trouble. The owners of the hotel called them in, but said that they didn't want to reveal their name or location. We assume he didn't want to be labeled as crazy, which is a pretty sound choice in our opinion. The group say that this place is the most active location they've ever seen, with EMF meters and all sorts of other supposedly specialist equipment showing high readings of whatever it is they show. After their initial investigation, a team went back to camp out overnight, which sounds like the start of a bad 90s TV show or something out of Goosebumps. Not that we're knocking Goosebumps here. They got everything set up properly and settled in for the night. They say they got a little more than they bargained for, however, dealing with one hell of a spooky night. They heard all sorts of footsteps and strange noises, but when the recordings over the following days were later played back, they discovered something far more scary than anything they had witnessed in person. With an all-female cast and crew on deck at the time and no living men in the area, they heard a woman yelling at someone to get off her while a man begs for help in the background. That's some twisted audio right there, and we can't make heads or tails of it. The nature of the recording is pretty violent, and the struggle sounds quite real, although we will admit that an audio recording really isn't proof of a haunting, only being proof that something was recorded and that this recording ended up being uploaded by a group of ghost hunters. As always, we're not saying that this group is going out of their way to mislead us, but we're gonna have to see something more concrete than that before we're finally convinced. They do say that the recording hasn't been altered, but even sitting US presidents can lie while under oath, so we're happy to take this statement with a grain of salt. That being said, Central New York Ghost Hunters is the oldest established ghost hunting agency in the state and is extremely well known and popular all over the states. They've even made trips further, making these people no average group of paranormal enthusiasts. Unfortunately, that means they've got even more pressure to produce, leading to a little more corner cutting from time to time. We're gonna be honest here and say that we really don't see enough real demand for ghost hunters to keep even the most well-established organization running with tangible evidence alone. Number 1, cave noises. When a spelunker descended into a cave, he knew he was in for a harrowing experience. That's part of the thrill of exploring caves after all. The Waldeck mine in Australia has been shut down for some time now, with some access points still open, allowing people to venture into the dark spaces within. This guy decided to turn on his camera after he thought he heard someone else in the mine with him, calling out to see who's there. He walks closer and stops, with the sound stopping as he does. After a brief pause, he continues on, prompting the sounds to kick back in and get even louder. He's puzzled at first and not all that scared considering his predicament. If we were trapped in a mind with a crazy, disembodied sound coming from somewhere in the dark, we'd be pretty panicked. He also noted that the sounds were coming from behind him for the most part, meaning that whatever it happened to be was also potentially following him. He uploaded the footage for people to take a look and see what they thought about the experience, with many people convinced that he must have run into a ghost. We know that mines are seriously creepy places, even while still in operation, and that they're full of strange sounds and ghostly drafts that come out of nowhere. This is all enhanced by the fact that everything's dark, but we don't think anything sinister was in that mine with him, or he wouldn't have made it out to share the video with us. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks. If you did, make sure you click that subscribe button before you head out if you're new. That's all you have to do. Come on, just click it. I know you want to. Oh, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like. I heard it gives you superpowers in the future or something. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.